One of the reasons that I'm in a mood today, aside from the fact that I had an allergic reaction to fish last night and spent half the night in the hospital, aside from that, the reason that I am in a mood today is because there's a guy who I thought was a very nice guy named Mark Duplass. Mark Duplass, you probably recognize his face. He's one of these sort of face guys from TV where if you see him walking around on the street, you go, yeah, I recognize that guy from TV. But he's not like a top-line star where you would know his name. He's apparently very big in sort of the indie director circles. Like he does a lot of indie director films. And he's somewhat well-known in those circles. Well, yesterday, he tweeted something out. And what he tweeted out was this. He tweeted out, fellow liberals, if you're interested at all in crossing the aisle, you should consider following Ben Shapiro. I don't agree with him on much, but he's a genuine person who once helped me for no other reason than to be nice. He doesn't bend the truth. His intentions are good, which is much appreciated. I mean, that's a nice thing for him to say, right? And I'll tell you what the nice thing that I did for Mark Duplass was. The nice thing I did for Mark Duplass is he emailed me like a lot of folks do. And he said, I'm doing a show that has to do with a narrative. There's a narrative in there about guns and gun control and gun use. And I wanted to get a perspective on the right side of the aisle because I don't get to hear that all that often. And I thought, well, that's a nice thing. I'm glad somebody from Hollywood actually cares enough to want to hear from people who are pro-Second Amendment folks, people who actually care about gun rights. So he came into the office and I kept it on the down low because there's a basic rule that I have here. We actually do have a fairly large number of active Hollywood stars who come into the office who are pretty big fans of the show or they enjoy what I do. And I have a rule with them, which is no one gets to take pictures, basically. We try to keep it on the down low as much as possible because Hollywood is a one-party Stalinist town. Hollywood is the kind of place where if it gets out that you once took a picture with me, they will crush you, right? If they find out that you are friendly with me, or we once had dinner, we went out to lunch or something, then they will come after you with a vengeance. And I knew this, right? So I knew this about Mark Duplass also. So Mark Duplass comes in, and I spent probably an hour and a half just talking over gun rights with him, trying to explain the various points of view, trying to explain where I thought the flaws were in the pro-Second Amendment position and how you counter those, where the flaws are in the pro-gun control position, how you counter those. I tried to be sort of as honest about the argument as I possibly could. And then we shook hands and he took off. And I said, if you need any other contacts, you need anybody who you need to talk to on either side of the aisle. I know some folks on both sides of the aisle who have different opinions on this issue. I'm happy to facilitate. I'm glad that you're actually trying to take into account views that may not be your own on this issue. Right, very nice. Everything's fine. And then I didn't ask him to do anything because I literally have not spoken with him since this day, which was what, maybe a couple of months ago, guys? It was a couple of months ago. And so he leaves and then he tweets that out, right? That very nice thing. And that's fine. And then he gets ratioed. So being ratioed on Twitter is where you get more comments than retweets on the message, more comments than likes on the message. People on the left start bringing up tweets out of context from 10 years ago. They start picking up columns I wrote when I was 19 that I disowned when I was 27. And they start trying to show him that the person who he had just endorsed as a genuine fellow is actually an evil, racist, sexist bigot, an evil, terrible, terrible person. And they start ratioing him, right? They start targeting him for saying a nice thing about me. And remember, that original tweet didn't say he endorses my political point of view. It doesn't say that he agrees with nearly anything that I have to say. It just says that I'm a nice, genuine person. That's it. Okay, which is really, really innocuous stuff. But no one expects the Spanish Inquisition. And so they showed up and they started going after Mark. And Mark, predictably enough, deleted the tweet, which is his prerogative. That's his prerogative. I didn't ask him to tweet it. I didn't ask him to delete it. That's all fine and dandy. And so I texted him and I just said, listen, dude, I understand you're in Hollywood. I get why you felt you had to delete the tweet. You know, I'm no hard feelings. Like, I totally get it. It happens in Hollywood all the time. I appreciate the original sentiment of the tweet. Okay, this morning, Mark Duplass puts out an actual apology for his original tweet. So after all of this happens, he actually apologizes for the original tweet. And not only does he apologize, he now suggests that I, in fact, endorse hatred, racism, homophobia, xenophobia, or another form of intolerance. Here's his entire response. Quote, so that tweet was a disaster on many levels. A disaster. I mean, like a tsunami or an earthquake. That tweet was a disaster. Tweeting that I was a nice guy who was genuine and I tried to be honest about the issues. That was a disaster on many levels. Not just one level, many levels. Like all the way down to Dante's seventh circle of hell. It's a disaster on every level. He says, so that tweet was a disaster on many levels. I want to be clear that I in no way endorse hatred, racism, homophobia, xenophobia, or any other such form of intolerance. Right, because neither do I. Like, so? And then he says, my goal has always been to spread unity, understanding, and kindness, but I'm going to make mistakes along the way. Sometimes I move too quickly when I get excited, or fail to do enough research, or I don't communicate myself clearly. I'm really sorry. I now understand that I need to be more diligent and careful. I'm working on that, but I do believe deeply in bipartisan understanding, and I will continue to do my best to promote peace and decency in this world right now. That said, I hear you. And I want to say thank you to those who reached out with constructive criticism. I've genuinely learned so much and wish everyone all the best. And he signs it with his name, Mark Duplass. Okay, again, free country. You can say what you want. I'm not even going to go into critiquing whether I think that he did the right thing here, because I think that it's obvious from what I'm saying that I think that this is a mistake, a strategic mistake. That if you're trying to reach across the aisle and you get criticism for reaching across the aisle, maybe it's the people doing the critiquing who are the problem. Maybe it's not you. Maybe Mark Duplass wasn't wrong to send that tweet. Maybe it's all the people who decided that any attempt to reach across the aisle was wrong. And let's be clear about something. This has almost nothing to do with me. Mark Duplass could have tweeted this about Guy Benson. He could have tweeted this about Charles Krauthammer. He could have tweeted this about Ann Coulter. He could have tweeted this about any person on the right. Any person. It would not matter. Right? He could have tweeted this about any friend. Probably half the left he could have tweeted this about. And there was a group of people, this SJW mob that exists on Twitter, solely to cudgel people into line. And those are the people who help run Hollywood, by the way. A lot of those folks are people who are living in these massive mansions off of Sunset Boulevard and decrying capitalism. I promise it wasn't just the Twitter. It wasn't just the people on Twitter, the randos on Twitter who spend all of their days in their mommy's basement and are tweeting out nasty things about me to Mark Duplass. I promise you what happened is that his wife probably came to him and said, I got calls from my friends. His brother, who I guess is his business partner, probably came to him and said, listen, we're getting blowback for this. Other directors with whom he is friends, I'm sure, came out and said, why would you possibly have done this? My favorite along these lines, by the way, was Tom Arnold. So Tom Arnold, to be clear, is another person we've been nice to here at this office. Tom Arnold came in and actually did a show with Michael Knowles, and we were kind enough to let him in with his camera crew into the office. And here's what he tweeted out. Now remember, I said nothing publicly about anything Duplass said here, nothing, until he actually put out that statement, at which point I just said, you know, it's sad that this is what the discourse has come to. Here's what Tom Arnold, a crazy person, tweeted this morning. Ben Shapiro, 5'2", and sounds prepubescent, but technically a man, so for purposes of brawl and all the kicks headed toward his teeth and face, he shall be deemed all man. And this is after Tom Arnold had suggested, how dare I exist, because Mark Duplass got in trouble for having texted or tweeted something about me. So that's Tom Arnold, right? I'm sure that a lot of Mark's friends were coming after him for all of this. Honestly, I feel bad for Mark. I feel bad for Mark because Mark, I think, was originally trying to do the right thing, and I think that Hollywood does not allow you to do the right thing. Hollywood has a vested interest in making sure that everyone who disagrees with them in any small, minute amount is portrayed as the worst person on earth. Now, I don't want to say this is why you got Trump, but this is one of the reasons that they got Trump. When you lump everybody together, when you say that everybody who disagrees with you is a racist, sexist, homophobic, bitter clinger who just wants guns and God, when you say that that's what those people are and you cannot even speak to them, how dare you try to have an honest conversation with one of them? And then this is the predictable result, which is that you can bully anybody with just a few tweets. And unfortunately, I think this has become endemic. It's become endemic. You know, there's a lot of talk these days about the so-called intellectual dark web. So for folks who don't know what the intellectual dark web is, it's this group of people who are right and left. I believe I'm the only registered Republican on the list who have conversations with each other about a wide variety of issues. You've seen some members of the IDW appear on my Sunday special. So this would be people like Sam Harris, with whom I disagree about everything. And people like Eric Weinstein, who's going to be on Sunday. Right? So it's a bunch of, Eric is a Democrat. He's never voted Republican. Sam is a Democrat. He's never voted Republican. Right? It's people ranging from Jordan Peterson to Dave Rubin to Christina Hoff Sommers. I believe I'm the only registered Republican on that list. And the reason that exists, the reason this IDW exists, is because it's a bunch of people who are honestly trying to reach answers by having conversations with one another. And we don't want to engage with the worst versions of the arguments. We're not interested in engaging with the stupidest version the other side has to present. And we're not interested in the sort of mudslinging that goes on Twitter. And this has all become very, very popular. The reason it has become popular, the reason it is important, is because the left has become so deeply intolerant of anything remotely resembling an honest conversation. Because let me be clear about this. If Mark had come into this office and Mark had filmed us talking for an hour and a half in cordial fashion, he would have got hit the exact same way. He wouldn't have even had to tweet out that people should follow me on Twitter if they want an honest conservative take. He wouldn't have even had to do that. All that he would have had to do is set foot in the studio and treat me like a human being. That would have been enough to earn the ire of the left. That would have been enough. How do I know? Because when Bill Maher had me on his show and treated me like a human being, and by the way, it was pretty far left when he talked about Trump and Russia, he got blowback from the left for even having me on. Because that's how this works now. The goal here is to shut that Overton window tight, to make sure that no one who exists outside that Overton window, that area of authentic, decent discourse, that no one outside that area of accepted opinion, that area of accepted left-wing opinion is allowed to talk or have a conversation with one another. And if you had a problem with something I've said in the past, I have a great solution for this. Why don't you ask me about it? Because it turns out that if you did half a second of research, you would realize that people change their opinions over time, that people make mistakes. You might realize that you're misconstruing something someone said. Normally that's happening on purpose. Instead, it's a lot easier to run for the safe space and pretend that everyone who disagrees with you, and that's the real problem here, is that in the end, I'm sure Mark and I disagree on all these issues, and that really is the problem. Because if I were on the left, I don't think that Mark, number one, would have gotten the blowback, and number two, I doubt that he would have apologized because Hollywood doesn't care. Right? You can be friends with Tom Arnold, right? You can openly endorse Tom Arnold, who's a legit crazy person, and that's totally fine. But if you endorse anybody who disagrees with you, then you must be taken out to the woodshed and caned.